오픈AI가 메모리 칩 관련해서 삼성하고 하이닉스 얘기를 하셨는데 미국에도 그런 회사가 있단 말입니다.
The place where Korea is really number one is in HBM. One of the most critical components of AI Korea produces.
그것 때문에 지금 핸드폰 가격이 너무 올랐어요. 살 수가 없습니다.
Oh, sorry. Right now, what you see is AI demand is going like this. And so one of the three most important countries, I would say.
안녕하세요, 한석준입니다. 인류 리더들의 지혜를 전하는 시간 CEO 초대석. 오늘은 전 세계의 아주 중요한 패러다임을 완전히 뒤바꾼 기업이죠. 오픈AI를 이끌고 있는 최고 전략 책임자 제이슨 권님과의 시간을 마련했습니다. 어서 오십시오.
Thanks for having me here today. My name is Jason Kwan. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at OpenAI. I work on a variety of things there, ranging from policy, legal, international business, and some parts of marketing. And I worked with Sam Altman before, almost 4 years.
혹시 일하실 때 챗GPT 쓰시나요?
Yes, yeah, I use ChatGPT pretty much every day.
어떤 업무에 주로 많이 쓰십니까?
Most useful application of this at work is when it's connected to all the other systems. Whether we're using ChatGPT or Codex, which is the code generation version of ChatGPT that really is able to do things more on your computer because it's actually writing software programs and then executing the programs that it writes, connected to Gmail, Slack, Superhuman, Calendar. I'm able to, for example, every day, say, go through all of my Slack and email and tell me the top 10 most important things I need to pay attention to today. It's like having an assistant go through things. Or if I want to understand what's happening in a particular subject, I'll say, where are all of the sources of information for this particular topic I need to learn about in the next hour? And then it will say, okay, these are the Slack channels, here's like 5 emails, and then here are the Google Docs. And they're not even necessarily ones that I wrote. It's able to just go and collect all this information for me because it's going and searching, reading, understanding, thinking, analyzing, and then presenting me with the answer. That saves me an enormous amount of time because I don't have to go do that. I don't have to ask somebody else to go do that. There's another feature that we have, internal versions of this that we call computer use. I can just tell Codex, write me an email and send it to this particular person and go ahead and just execute that. It knows how to then open my email program, start drafting an email, and then come back and ask me, is this exactly what you wanted? And I'll say yes or no, or edit it, and then it'll send it. I think people are used to thinking about ChatGPT as being able to write the email and then I cut and paste it. But what I'm saying is you just tell it to write the email and send it, and it is able to do that. A year ago, I was just chatting with it to get answers and summarizations. Now I'm actually telling it to do things for me and do work for me, and it's able to increasingly do that. Even when it comes to things like legal analysis, it's really quite excellent these days. And so before I might have looked up legal information on various sorts of sources, legal databases and whatnot, now when I have a particular problem that needs that kind of analysis, I will just present it the problem and I'll tell it exactly what I want. Paper, do I want a short memo? And it can give me pretty good legal analysis. I'm able to use that and deploy it very rapidly. Maybe final example of how I use a tool is I can just make dashboards with the Codex tool with any amount of arbitrary data. I can point it at a bunch of data sources and I can just say, create a dashboard for me with tracking these 4 statistics over the last month. It will just write the program and I'll have it. And it's something that before all of these AI tools existed, I would have had to have programmed it or asked somebody else to do that. Now it just writes the program for me. That way I'm able to take lots of information and make sense of it very quickly as if I had a software application built for me. And so these are some of the examples of the ways that I use it. And there'll probably be more powerful ways coming in the future.
그러면 지금 현재 AI를 사용하시면서 매일매일 돌아가는 루틴 업무들이 줄었을 거 아니에요? 그게 AI를 쓰시기 전에 비해서 몇 % 정도의 시간이 세이브가 됐다고 생각하세요?
It probably saves me hours every day. In the US, people who use it a lot are saving on average, an hour a day. But I don't think we need to stop at that question. I think another version of this is not only does it save you time, does it enable you to do more or different kinds of work that you couldn't really have done before? If I need to create an image, for example, for draft ideas for a marketing campaign, I could take an idea that I have in my head and generate an image and marketing copy and a campaigner and say, something like this is what I'm looking for. And then I can communicate now my idea much better to somebody who's actually the marketing professional. That's not work I could have done before. I would have had to sit down and kind of try to fumble through my explanation and draw really bad pictures on the whiteboard for my marketing colleague. But now it's much easier to say, like, something like this image, and I can instantly communicate what I have in my head to somebody that's a colleague.
와, 챗GPT 앞으로 어디까지 갈지 진짜 궁금해집니다. 작년 말을 기준으로 했을 때 챗GPT의 인구당 유료 구독자 수에서 한국이 1위입니다. 한국인이 챗GPT를 정말 좋아하는 어떤 배경이나 이유나 이런 걸 챗GPT에서는 어떻게 생각을 하십니까?
It's a good question. Koreans is one of our top 5 markets still in terms of consumer subscriptions, which says something because if you look at Korea from a GDP basis, it's outside of the top 10. But in terms of subscriptions, in terms of our product and AI, it's in the top 5. It's outperforming what it should be sort of on baseline economic measures. I think Koreans are high achievers. So ChatGPT helps you achieve your goals, helps you learn things really quickly. You can ask it any sorts of questions and, it gives you back pretty good answers. Second is Koreans like to learn English. And so the product is very good at multilingual performance. I can speak to it in Korean and tell it to translate things back to me in English and vice versa. I could also just decide in the middle of a conversation, speak to me in Italian now, and it'll do that. I think the third that's kind of related to high achievement is Koreans are always looking for an edge. They're very competitive. As soon as this product comes out, it feels like it gives you a bit of an edge in terms of work, education, figuring out how to live your life, things like that. Other thing is it was very instantly relatable to all generations. Most technology products, they're adopted by young people and it takes a really long time for, older generations to adopt. But I remember when ChatGPT first came out, my parents who are over 70 years old started texting me and saying, I'm using your product. It also came out in the Korean newspapers and I think on Korean TV as well. And so it's the most connected country in the world in terms of internet connectivity. The interest was there very, very high from the beginning. Korea is being a very fast technology adopter.
저는 처음 나온 날을 기억해요. 한석준에 대해서 설명해줘 그랬더니 70년대에 활동했던 유명한 여자 아나운서다 이렇게 나와가지고 우리가 굉장히 웃었었거든요. 그래서 아니 뭐 정확하지 않네. 그래서 사실 안 봤어요. 근데 그게 불과 한 2주 3주 만에 아주 빠르게 개선이 되더라고요. 그래서 이것 봐라 재밌네. 그러면 나중엔 어디까지 갈까? 이게 굉장히 궁금하고 기대가 됐었던 면이 있습니다.
I think that was something very new for people is that you could ask it anything and then it wouldn't always give you the same answer. So it feels more like human. I think that's actually what this technology is about and where it's going. So it's not just about knowledge, although that's a big part of it. It's about making computers more naturalistic and closer to what we want as people. If you think about how computer programs themselves have evolved over the last couple of decades, if you started playing with a computer 20 or 30 years ago, like I did, you have command line interfaces, and then you move to windowing systems, and then you eventually got phones and tablets and buttons and everything. And every year they get a little bit easier to use, but still you're being put into an experience, right? Whereas now with AI, you can interact with it much more like you are just talking to somebody. It's able to do things and answer questions and also carry out instructions online. More of the computer is doing work for you rather than making you do work. And I think that is really where this is going.
와, 이 얘기를 들으면 들을수록 정말 더 궁금한 얘기가 많고 더 깊게 물어보고 싶은 얘기들이 정말 많습니다. 조금 더 거시적인 관점에서 오픈 AI와 한국에 대한 얘기를 좀 해볼 텐데요. 한국 시장을 어떻게 바라보시는지 오픈 AI가 바라볼 때는 어떠한 전략적인 의미가 있습니까?
The market is extremely important to us because it is one of the most advanced economies in the world. It is the most connected economy in the world when it comes to internet connectivity. So we think that the types of usage people uncover as they use the technology, Korea is going to be one of the leading places for us to see how people evolve with the technology. Because it's a general purpose technology, so we're not designing all the ways you can use it. It's intelligence, and people use it for all sorts of surprising things that we didn't necessarily anticipate. One of the things that is a use case, for example, a bit in Korea, but then also parts of Asia, is that some people think of it a little bit like a fortune teller or horoscope. I didn't think that people would use ChatGPT that way. Clearly, people use it that way.
굉장히 많습니다. 네.
Apparently, it does that really well, and people value that. Those kinds of trends, usage patterns that help us make the product better and help us understand what people want. When it comes to the place of the country strategically, Korea is also very critical because of the supply chain or multiple layers of what it takes to actually have an AI economy. It first, of course, starts with land and power that you need for compute data centers. Most places have some land and there are various different aspects of energy distribution in the world. But then you have to have the chips for the data centers and you need logic chips and you need also memory memory chips. Obviously, Samsung and others in Korea are trying to get into logic chips to be able to compete with the TSMCs of the world. But the place where Korea is really number one is in HBM. And you need both of these chips to actually have compute to build the data centers, which you need to train the AI systems as well as to run the AI systems. So one of the most critical components of AI Korea produces, and it owns, I think, something in excess of 80% market share combined between SK Hynix and Samsung. It is one of the three most important countries, I would say, when it comes to AI. And I think President was very smart to think about positioning Korea as trying to be a top 3 AI power. And I think this is one of the key drivers of that. Other part of this that's very important is if you think about how AI gets distributed, it's not just that you have an AI system, you have to have a device somewhere where the system actually lives. And so you have one of the biggest device makers in the world here in Samsung. We work with and we'd like to work with more. And so strategically it's quite critical.
그 삼성하고 하이닉스 얘기를 하셨는데 사실 저는 여기서 궁금한 게 하나 있어요. 미국에도 그런 회사가 있단 말입니다. 마이크론이 있고 그리고 샌디스크도 비슷한 제품을 생산하고 있고.
It's just they don't have as much capacity. And I think you'll hear us and other companies talk about this too in the AI space, which is that the amount of production that's coming out, both in logic and memory chips, we still don't think is enough. If you look at the pattern of usage and development, not just with OpenAI, but some of the other labs, is every so often we run out of compute. These industries do, both logic and memory, because it's a hardware business, essentially. They have to plan out their production cycles a couple years in advance. What they're producing now was based on what they thought demand would be a couple years ago. Right now, what you see is AI demand is going like this. So they have to really catch up on capacity. And so when something like that is happening, you kind of need the whole industry to actually be working on this, not just one company.
그것 때문에 지금 노트북이랑 핸드폰 가격이 너무 올랐어요. 살 수가 없습니다.
I'm sorry.
지금 챗GPT 같은 경우에는 한국에 있는 많은 회사들과 협력하고 있지 않습니까? 카카오톡이랑도 협력을 하고 있고.
We're always open to more collaboration with Korean companies that are in touch or very trusted with Korean users. And I think we also have some work that we're doing with Naver, for example. When it comes to cyber, that's also a very rich area of collaboration. We have this program that we call Daybreak, which is about making sure that defenders get access to the cyber capabilities faster than others do. We will be talking about that more in Korea very soon, which is to have a cyber action plan. It will basically make it easier for Korean companies and public sector organizations in Korea to be in this program to get preferential access or early access to some of the cyber capabilities. Those are some of the initiatives I think that are happening right now. One of the other things that we are very focused on is finding ways to support the Korean startup ecosystem. This goes back to a commitment we made to the Korean Development Bank a couple of years ago, which is to make sure that we are paying attention to the Korean startups, finding ways to help them accelerate the development. And one of the things that we do there is, we have startup programs where they can get discounted access to our models when it comes to token pricing. So those are some of the things that we're doing and we continue to do to partner with the Korean economy and the Korean startups and technology companies here.
그 처음에 챗GPT를 사용할 때 거짓말한다는 얘기 많이 했지 않습니까? 아까 이제 저에 대해서 얘기했던 것도 마찬가지고 그래서 다 믿으면 안 된다 이런 말도 하는데 이렇게 틀린 답을 주거나 환각이 나타날 때 사용자가 그거에 대해서 어떻게 대처하는 게 좋을까요?
This issue, I think, it really comes down to how you use it. And so I'll make an analogy to you. Let's say I ask you a question about semiconductor design. Right. So you learned it a while ago. You might remember a few things.
Not at all.
Not at all. Well, let's say that you remembered a few things. You might answer something off the top of your head. And it might be right. But there's probably some probability that it's just a little bit wrong because you're just remembering off the top of your head. But because you studied it, you probably know this reference book, look up this set of information. You know where to go and look. Right. And so then your answer gets better if you have this reference. And I think that you should think about using this intelligence that way, which is the models get better and better at just answering things off the top of their head and being 100% right. But every so often they're not. But if you're able to connect them to 100% reliable sources, they know how to use the tool. So that's the other thing that these models are getting good at, and that's what.
이거 좀 웃기는 질문일 수 있는데 일단 챗GPT를 무료로도 쓸 수 있고 유료로도 쓸 수 있고 유료에서도 금액에 따라 여러 가지 버전이 있습니다. 그 버전에 따라서 할루시네이션이 많이 날 수 있고 적게 날 수 있고 그렇습니까?
The main difference between free and the various tiers of paid is rate limits, how many requests can you send per month, and features. So the pro version you can use in an agentic way. It thinks for longer. You can make it use tools. The free version, you not really do those things. So it's not the intelligence part that actually gets worse. It's more that how that intelligence is applied and how much you can use it. Those are the real differences between free and
좀 바보 같은 질문이었지만 이걸 여쭤본 게 인터넷 농담 중에 그런 게 있었어요. 제 챗GPT는 유료여서 거짓말을 하지 않습니다. 뭐 이런 농담들이 있었어요.
I think that that's interesting too, because it goes a little bit to the point we were talking about earlier, which is that Koreans are always looking for an edge. So I'm going to pay and like try to get that edge. But the other part of this is there's a bit of personalization that goes into AI. And we see this with this feature that we add, which is the default personality. You can decide to make it more nerdy. You can decide to make it funnier. You can decide to make it warm, or you can just leave it professional. The interesting thing that you see is some people have pride about how they use AI. So I take your statement, it's meant to be a joke and kind of funny, but the thing that is enduring about what you noticed is that some people want to be known for how they use it and what value they get out of it. And I do think that there's a little bit of pride maybe that comes for some users. And I think that's really interesting because that's another thing I think about when people say, oh, it's just going to make us all lazy and do things for us. Again, it just depends on how you use it and what value you take from it and what kind of relationship you want with the technology.
배경에는 이런 생각도 좀 있는 것 같아요. 이제 AI가 나오고 난 지 이제 불과 한 3, 4년밖에 안 됐지만 그 사이에 엄청나게 발전을 했고 그 엄청나게 발전을 하면서 우리가 제일 많이 느끼는 공포가 인간의 잡을 다 AI가 대체하면 어떡하지? 하는 부분이에요. 그래서 제이슨 권 같은 분을 모시고 제일 여쭤보고 싶었던 질문 중에 하나가 이겁니다. 실리콘밸리에서는 AI가 정말 지금보다 훨씬 더 많이 발전하고 훨씬 더 많은 일을 할 수 있게 될 미래 시대에 인간에게 필요한 역량은 뭐라고 보고 있나요?
I'm not one of those people thinks that it's going to result in all of this unemployment per se. I don't eliminate that possibility. But what I really think is in economics, there's this theory of like not thinking of the amount of work as a lump of work. There's a fixed amount of work. I think the amount of work that exists is really a product of how much human desire there is for things, accomplishments, products, outputs. And my experience with people is that they always want more. So that means even if it's able to do most of the work that we do today, we're going to find more things that we want. That's going to create the need for more work to serve those needs. And the thing about AI is, yes, it is very smart, is able to continue to learn. But what I just said implies that there's always going to be more to learn. And more things for people to decide matter and are important. One of the things I would say is if we talk to our parents or grandparents when they were our age and we told them what we were doing right now, they would say, you're not working. This is not work, but this is work, right? And so I think that we'll find more things like this. I think that we will come to value even as AI is able to do more for us. Ultimately, deciding what it's going to do is still going to be something that is a human activity.
방금 말씀하신 내용은 엔지니어라기보다는 철학자 같으신데요.
I'll just take that as a compliment.
그러면 이것도 되게 궁금합니다. 오픈AI에 계시잖아요. 지금 전 세계에서 가장 젊은이들이 들어가고 싶은 회사예요. 누구 뽑아요?
It's a good question. I think really what you're asking is what are the core qualities? Sure, you have to be smart. You have to have like some experience and you have a lot of knowledge about whatever you're supposed to be good at. But I think there are two things that probably matter the most. One is I think you have to think about the job more like a mission. So we have a mission, and our mission is to ensure that AGI benefits all of humanity. And that is more than just work. It's not like going to work at a company where the ultimate goal is just for the company to grow more, make more money, and make more products. Those are all fine goals, I think. But really what we're trying to do at a company is to do all those things, plus make sure that this technology is stewarded. It's going to be something we think is going to change lots of things. And how we and others in this industry decide how to make the technology and deliver it to people is going to make a difference in how the technology changes the world. And so because of that, we really try to look for people that think about their jobs a little bit differently. The other thing I would say is I think you really need to be somebody that thinks about a goal or outcome, has strong belief. I'll say why that is important, because when OpenAI started, back in late 2015, most people thought it was stupid. That's not really the direction of AI research that's going to work. there is no such thing as artificial general intelligence that we'll be able to make.
진짜 그랬어요?
Yeah.
진짜로? 아니, 그런 얘기를 듣긴 했어요. 뭐 기사나 인터넷에서 보긴 했는데.
These people are kind of a little crazy. That was a lot of people just didn't think it would work. When OpenAI came out, GPT-2, this was I think in 2018 or in 2019. Yeah, it was before we even had an API. This was not even GPT-3, it's GPT-2. Lots of people said, oh, okay, that language model is interesting, but it's not going to turn into something that is super useful.
Not even useful, interesting.
And so we just continued to work and believe in things like the scaling laws, just add more compute to the fundamental algorithms that train models, and you'll get more and more capabilities as you add compute. That still required a deep belief in not giving up. If you talk to one of our co-founders, Greg Brockman, there were at least 5 or 6 times between 2015 and 2020 that he thought the company would just fail. And he just kept going. Those first 4 or 5 years of just that sheer determination is what enabled everything else to happen. If he had given up any one of those times, we wouldn't even be sitting here, right? So I think that that's probably one of the most important qualities. It still matters now because it still takes a belief in trying stuff and making it work to even put out ChatGPT in the first place. Even we didn't necessarily think it was going to be this interesting or successful product, but we tried anyway.
지금 말씀하신 내용들이 다 굉장히 좋고 만약에 정말 그런 사람들만 있으면 참 좋은 회사일 거라는 생각은 듭니다만 지원자가 그런 생각이 있는지 알아보는 거 굉장히 어려운 일이잖아요. 마치 누군가가 나는 그런 사람이야 라고 거짓말하고 있어도 그걸 알아내는 게 어렵지 않습니까?
Yeah, sure. It's sometimes it's hard to know with certainty, but you can sometimes get a sense of this by asking certain questions, or by looking at their track record. How can they talk about a time that they failed, but they kept going? Or have they started something on their own before? It takes some amount of determination to do that and keep going, even after maybe it's very hard. Again, like the point of that determination is not that you just have energy. It's that you actually are able to continuously overcome, moments where things are not working and things keep failing around you. I think that you can have a conversation and ask questions where you get that information from somebody you can observe.
AI 시대가 다가오니까 아이들이 뭐 이렇게 키워야 된다 저렇게 키워야 된다 굉장히 그런 말들이 많거든요.
Lots of people have opinions about this.
저도 지금 아이가 지금 8살이라 굉장히 그 고민이 많습니다. AI 시대에 뭘 할 수 있어야 된다라고 아이들에게 말씀하십니까?
So I think that what I do with my kids is I will sit with them and put them in a frame of mind where they want to be curious. Oh, ask it this, ask it that. Have it tell me about this other thing rather than go do this stuff for me. We do that as adults because we're busy. We have lots of things. But as children, I think the most important quality, even without even AI, the most important quality to always try and accentuate is the desire to learn things and the desire to question and the desire to keep being curious. And so that's really what I think about is how can I use this in a way where it's another thing for them to be curious about. That's just my approach. I think other people do different things. I'm not sure that there's a right or wrong answer here. It's probably just something that maybe the meta advice here is however you think is right for raising your kids, there's probably a way to use the technology or the ChatGPT or the tool that fits your philosophy because it's a very flexible thing. And so what I would say for people not to do is let the tool determine how they decide that their kids are going to do things. I would just say, what are the things that you value as a parent? How do you want to raise your kids in the first place? And then just slip the tool into your own philosophy, your own parenting values. One of the things you can always do is tell it what your values are. It could probably give you suggestions for how it fits. That's another, I think, method for figuring out that question.
그러면 오늘날 이렇게 성공적인 인생을 살 수 있게 된 제이슨권께서 해오신 가장 중요한 일 혹은 중요한 마음가짐? 이건 뭔가요?
So first of all, it's a lot of luck. Decided not to move to Silicon Valley, if I didn't meet certain people, if I didn't get certain education, if my parents had not moved to the United States, if I joined OpenAI later, none of these things would happen, right? So there's a lot of luck involved. I would say like the things that I think have been important. Number one, it's really finding ways to work with lots of different people. It's been very important, I think, at OpenAI because there's such a different combination of people that make this place actually work. Everyone from researchers to people that applied engineering to people that sell the products, to people that market or communicate about them and everything else. You can only be as effective in an organization as your ability to work with lots of different people. If you can only work with a small number of people, then probably are only effective through that population. The other one I would say is I still want to learn all the time. I'm just really lucky that I'm in a place where there's so much to learn all the time. But this is something that has been very important at the company because in order to really understand how to do lots of the things that I have to carry out as part of my job responsibilities, I have to know what's going on, right? And then I also have to understand it to the point where I can try to think ahead to what might need to happen 6 months from now, 18 months from now. Because the technology is changing so rapidly, it just means I can't just say, oh, I learned this and then move on. I have to keep learning things every single day. And I think that that's where the rest of the world is going too. I just think that it's not that, oh, because we have all of this artificial intelligence, we don't have to think anymore. We don't have to do things or learn things anymore because we can just ask the tool. What it really means is that in order to really get the most out of this new economy that we're going into is that your qualities of being able to learn, wanting to learn, loving to learn are going to become some of the most important things.
그럼 이제 진짜 마지막 질문입니다. 오픈 AI가 그리고 있는 미래는 어떤 모습인가요? 그리고 그런 미래를 만들어가는 회사에서 일한다는 건 어떤 느낌인가요?
I think of a couple of things here in terms of what we're trying to build. One is broad access to this technology. It's not just about us making it and then having the people who can pay the most have access to the technology. It's one of the reasons why we offer it for free. The thing that we're always trying to do is make it cheaper. So if you look at the amount of utility that you get per dollar spent, it's gone up probably more than 100x in terms of just tokens, which is the output input, and how much we charge for that. I think the future that we want is anybody in the world, regardless of their income, can access problem-solving capabilities that before this technology was around, you could have only gotten if you were like the CEO of a company, you had 500 employees, all thinking very hard for you. In the future, I think that anybody on the planet, they have an internet connection and a device, can get that kind of intelligence capability essentially for free. So I think that democratized access is really about empowering everybody on the planet with that amount of capability. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do. Other thing that we're really trying to do with the technology is enabling lots of people or ourselves to solve really hard problems that require that amount of intellectual capacity focused on particular things. Another good example of this is one of my favorite use cases is we work with the Boston Children's Hospital, the Manton Center, and they handle orphan diseases. So orphan diseases are diseases that are so rare, there's not a lot of resources, assigned within the medical system to understand them well, diagnose them, and certainly not to cure them. So they're like rare genetic diseases. What ChatGPT has done for the center is they use it now to diagnose what is the actual rare condition a child has or a child has passed away from. And so before this, there are all these children and their parents would not know what the actual disease even was, what the genetic condition was. They've been using it now, I think, for about a year, and they've diagnosed, I think, 20 or more cases. Now, those families, they don't have a cure, but they know what the problem is. And the other thing that happened as part of this is that they used ChatGPT, and in one of these cases, they discovered that this one known genetic condition that they thought only appeared in children, I think, below the age of 12, it appeared in a child, I think, that was 14 or 15. And it was a slight variation of the known condition that ChatGPT discovered for them. And so that's new scientific insight. Again, just like the Erdős problem that I was talking about before. And those are the kind of hard problems that we want people to also use the technology for. So on one hand, everybody on the planet gets an incredible amount of intelligence basically for free. And that's very empowering. And then on the other is people that are very focused on the hardest problems that we have as a species. They're going to take this technology and apply it to those, and the outcome of solving those problems end up benefiting us all because there are things like curing diseases, there are things like creating new materials, there are things like potentially solving hard problems like climate change, that we all have this problem. The way I would say it is that the people that are using the tools all have the ability to do that. That's really what we're trying to do. Give everybody else that kind of potential.
우리 모두가 할 수 있다.
That's the goal.
알겠습니다. 오늘 시간 내주셔서 감사합니다.
Thanks for having me.
우리가 오픈AI 많이 쓰고 있지만 실제로 오픈AI가 어떤 생각을 가지고 있고 또 우리에게 어떤 걸 주려고 하는지에 대해서 오늘 이 시간을 통해서 우리가 훨씬 더 많이 알게 됐기를 진심으로 바랍니다. 오늘 영상도 끝까지 시청해 주셔서 감사합니다.